Welcome back to the Inner Journeys Outer Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Corey Jacobson. And with me today, we got another special guest, Paul Madsen. He's a business owner, and he works out at the gym that I work out of here. And a quick mention of, I've been battling an illness for the past month, and my voice recently kind of got messed up. So that's why I sound like this today. Welcome, Paul.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. I have been very interested in you as a person since I started working at Fiddle Eat. Probably because you're in my eyes, you're a very successful person. And kind of wanted to pick your brain today to see what we can learn and share with people.
I'm happy to share.
Yeah. So I think really to learn about people, you kind of have to know how they began, their start. So I've heard some stories about your youth and some of the crazy stuff you've done. So I just wanted to, let's start there and let's say if starting from 10 to 18 years old, what are some of the themes of your life?
Yeah, 10 years old, Paul. I grew up in Eau Claire. So at that age, I was living over on 8th and Vine on the west side of town, and grew up with mostly my mom and my grandma. And my mom was ill, and so my grandma took care of myself and my sisters, and very involved in the Catholic Church. That wasn't too far from our house. I was lighting candles and holding the gospel during church service on Sundays, and was at church a lot, and did a lot of things because it was near the house and my grandma was involved there. And right around that time, my mom passed away, actually, and my dad and the gal he'd remarried, my stepmom, moved up from Janesville, Wisconsin, to I think make it more comfortable for us kids. Because at the point that my mom passed, my grandma moved back to Arizona, where she had been from. She, I think, hated the winter. Like a lot of people, you get older, and the winter in Wisconsin is not fun to fight through. And so my dad moved up with, like I said, my family dynamics changed a lot around that time, and I switched schools, went from a Catholic school to a public school, and Lincoln Elementary, which is not Lincoln Elementary anymore. Got a paper route when I was 12. I called and called and called to get a paper route, and finally I got one, and I got another one, and delivered a couple hundred newspapers every day on the blocks and streets, in my neighborhood. So that was a lot of people ask, how did you get going in business? And sometimes I throw that answer out. I started with a paper route, because that's, you learn a lot with a paper route, especially back then. It wasn't, a lot of paper routes are done by adults now, and they drive a van and they chuck them out, where, I had my red wagon on Sundays, and I'd pile up the newspapers and walk up and down the street, and you had to collect the money from the customers. So I had a collection book, and you knock on the door. And, hey, it's $4.80 a week, or $9.60, or $19.20 for the 4 week. So you learn a lot because you're interacting with people, you're collecting money, you're providing a service. They like to tell you when you're not putting the paper in the right spot, or, that you didn't get it there on time, and just daily responsibilities too. Oh yeah. At that age, there's a lot of kids that, and there was times where I missed it, where I was doing sports after school, and then there was something else going on, and pretty soon it was getting dark, and I'm like, oh shit, I never delivered my newspapers, So
that's a pretty difficult period of your life, I would say. Losing your mom and having that family dynamic change so much.
I'd argue that the older you get, the harder it is to deal with big changes like that, because when you're young, obviously it was hard and I cried, but I remember a couple days later, a lot of family were in town for the funeral, and I'm out in the driveway playing basketball with my uncle, and happy, normal kid stuff, not, where And I remember actually thinking, like, should I be this happy since my mom just died? Like,
Yeah.
But, you realize, especially with Faith, that she's still up there. She's still watching. She's still with you. She was sick. So it was and she went peacefully in her sleep. I think it was harder maybe having my grandma leave, because my grandma was my main, she was a very old school Catholic woman that it was breakfast at 6 a.m. with coffee, and, everything was, she had dinner on the table every night, and she kind of treated me like the man of the house a little bit, even though I was a young man or a young kid. Like, she was respectful, and, I grew up in a house with my sisters, my mom and my grandma, so it was all girls and then me. And I was very excited to have my dad around, because I didn't get to see my dad a lot. And when I did, it was always fun times. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't remember it being super difficult. It was kind of sad that it happened. Right. But it was also known that it was going to happen for a long time. Yeah. She didn't leave the house, so. Okay. Kind of a sad start to your podcast episode here.
I mean, it's what happened in your life, right?
Yeah.
So, how long did you have that paper out for?
I kept it until I was able to get a regular job. So somewhere around the time I got my driver's license, 16-ish, and then I resigned from being a paperboy. But I did it for a while where I would have, I was talking about, doing sports after school, where I would have friends do it sometimes, and sometimes my stepmom would do it, and I probably kept it longer than I should have. But, because it's an everyday responsibility. Yeah. But it was good. I made a lot of money and afforded a lot of things that I wouldn't have without it. So.
Yeah. Was the big lesson from that just like the responsibility, handling money, and taking care of customers, essentially?
Yeah, yep. And, you had to be pretty detailed, especially when you're having someone else do it for you, where it's like, okay, this paper goes in the mail slot, but this paper goes in between the screen door and the main door on the side of the house, and this one the guy wants in the slot under the mail box, whatever. I had like the spot that everybody wanted their paper noted, and you have to keep track of that. And you gain customers and you lose customers, and you don't want to deliver to people that don't want it anymore, and you don't want to forget the new people. So, there's a lot of little lessons in there along the way, about being detailed and, doing what you say you're going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that served you a lot moving on the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think that'd be good for any kid, really, to have something. Now I think we would say, well, we don't, they don't want to burden the kid with that kind of responsibility when they're, at least maybe I'm just thinking of how my wife likes to treat our boys, and, it's a lot more, life is planned out for them, where, maybe that was just not having the same parents all the time, or having parents that were not the normal mom and dad type of a situation, where you kind of get some extra responsibility as a young man, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So,
definitely, for sure. Okay, so when you get your driver's license, so let's say 16 to 20, what does your life look like from that point?
So I was, we're in high school now at 16, running cross country and track. Had a great coach, Jim Schmidt, who I heard is just retiring. And he was also the chemistry teacher and the physics teacher, and just won like teacher of the year. He was just an awesome guy. He was a young guy that was really into not only the coaching and the teaching, but just, making the school a better place. And so big influence in my life at that time. I worked a couple of different fast food jobs. I worked at Menards as a cart boy. I remember working at Menards the day shift on Saturdays and Sundays until sometime between lunch and dinner. I would work the morning, and then I would drive the interstate from where the Menards was out on the west side of town over to the south side where I worked at the A&W by the mall, and I would change my clothes into my work clothes while I was driving because the timeline from when I punched out at one and punched into the next was about enough time to drive there. And I just thought, I'll just change my clothes while I'm driving. So that's what I did a lot of times. And I would work like, I enjoyed going to work, right? Like, I don't know what was with me at that age, but I had a great time flirting with all of the college-age cashiers at Menards, stocking the bags at their cash register and getting carts pulled in. And then at the A&W, same kind of thing. It was kind of like my social time. Okay. And I was getting paid to do it. Yeah. And I was learning stuff. And I don't know, I really enjoyed working. And that was clear early on. I didn't mind depositing my paycheck in my bank account either. I think that was, I remember smiling a lot when I would make deposits. And realizing young, like, I like the security of being financially secure. Yeah. You know?
Okay.
Yep.
So you worked 2 jobs pretty much back to back for all of high school, most of high school?
Yeah. As soon as I could get a job, I had a job. I worked at the McDonald's because that was kind of not that far from my house. And then my buddy got a job at Menards, which is kind of known for paying more in town. And he was making $1 more than me. So I was like, well, that sounds better than what I'm going to go over there and do carts. And then we were out to eat at the A&W, and I was like, man, there are a lot of really cute girls working at this A&W. Maybe I should get an app. I think I actually got an application so I could talk to the girl that was working there. And then I ended up getting an interview and hired. And I met a good friend named Jamie Giebord there, was a part of my life for a long time. I don't see him that much anymore, but just a great guy. And then he ended up getting a job at the Shield Sports Store when it opened at the mall. And as I got to be closer to 18, I just thought, I loved working. I worked for 2.5 years at the A&W, and it was the Abear family, Chuck and Lori Abear, and some of their other family members worked there, and it was just a great place. 2.5 years, worked the front of the house, back of the house. I was a manager for the last, year and a half. But for some reason in my head, that's not something you're supposed to do after 18 years old or something. It was like a high school job. And the sports store seemed like a better next step for me. And Jamie was having a lot of success there. And Shields is a great organization. So I went and assembled bikes. And I was able to do that my senior year of high school because I only had a couple of classes I had to take in the morning. I had senior English and junior Phi Ed were the only 2 classes I had left to take. I had done a really, the way I had booked my classes throughout high school, I always took the early bird class, which means you get an extra period before school, everyone else starts, and I never took a study hall. And I took as many of the enriched or advanced placement classes as was offered. And then I was thinking about being done early, and I went and talked to a counselor. And looking back, I got probably some bad advice from that counselor because I was like, hey, I could go start college early, and I was pretty motivated, and I was on this track. And she kind of said, you have almost no responsibility, and you should really just like kind of kick back and enjoy this time because you're never going to have this. Probably was more her projecting what she would want at that point in her life on me.
For sure.
And I took that as like, okay, I guess that's what I should do. So I worked at Shields, but I did a lot more screwing around. I was out snowmobiling and doing other things. And I got into a lot of trouble in high school too because you have a lot of free time, and when your parents are getting divorced, no one's really watching over you. And I didn't have a lot of money, but I wanted to do a lot of things. And I had a buddy that, he was thinking about buying a dirt bike or something. Because people had it chained to a tree on the side of the road and with a for sale sign. And we went and looked at it, and somehow I convinced him, like, we should just go cut that chain and take that dirt bike and just go, like, their insurance company will just reimburse them. And, and we got in a lot of trouble for that. We did do that. And so I was dealing with that in high school too. I had some legal problems that I kind of had to own up to. And
How did they catch you?
we traded that dirt bike, or I traded that dirt bike to a guy. He had an old Jeep.
Okay.
And I registered the Jeep in my name, and then that guy took and crashed that dirt bike out on like a trail, and the DNR came out and did a report, and he almost died. And then they realized this motorcycle was a stolen motorcycle. And then he said, well, here's some information about the Jeep. They came and found me at school. I had to write a long report for this officer about this. And it was more than just the one dirt bike, because we thought it was quite a rush to go and do that.
Okay.
At that age, and there were a few nights where we were up to no good, and it caught up with me. And I think that was early in my junior year of high school, and I spent the last 60 days of high school in jail.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Damn.
Which was probably, after everything that had happened, it was probably a good little reset for me to kind of put me back on the straight and narrow, because, like I said, I had a lot of free time. I was only going to a couple classes. I was doing sports, and I was doing shields.
You were told to not be responsible.
Yeah, well, I took her up on it. And yeah, I had a large, in my mind, I don't remember what it was, but I think it was over $10,000 of like restitution that I owed. I had no money, right? And
right.
I had to pay back these people who had, in my mind when we were doing it, was these people were selling this thing, so they had it wasn't like their prized possession, right? They were trying to exchange it for money, and I thought, well, yeah, the insurance company will give them the money, and I don't, kind of the faceless insurance company is the one taking the hit here.
Right, yeah.
But, yeah, and it was some of that, though, you look at it and you go, we accomplished a lot, because it was exciting and it was fun. It was just illegal.
Yeah. And
so I learned something in that you can accomplish a lot when you find something that is exciting and you stick to it, and you just got to find something that's legal.
Yes, within the law and not.
Well, there's a lot of people that make that mistake in various different ways, and I'm just happy I did it when I was really young.
Right.
Or young enough where I didn't end up with more serious consequences.
Right. How did you spend your 60 days in jail?
So I was in jail in Pepin, Wisconsin, or Durand, which is Pepin County.
Yeah.
Because that's where the dirt bike was from. And I don't think, like I said, I'm glad the way that it turned out, but the judge definitely had made an example of me. Okay. Somehow I ended up with a public defender because I had no money. Yeah. My friend that was involved with me, his mom his family had more money. And his mom worked her ass off. She was a nurse that worked double shifts and was just an awesome lady and kind of part my mom. And she paid for him to have like a real representation. And I had this alcoholic public defender at the time, and his nickname was Wild Bill.
Okay. That's a good nickname.
Yeah, great public defender. Yeah. So his case got moved to Eau Claire, and it got, he did no jail time, and it was cleared up pretty quickly. And this guy, this older judge who's now passed away, Morey, last name Morey, Judge Morey. I tried to look him up recently. That's how I found out he's deceased. But he made an example out of me. And it's a very small town, right?
Yeah.
So, but the jail was me and like 5 guys that were in there for DUI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the sheriff's wife made all the meals. I mean, it was a pretty home, family-based kind of a situation. Like, it might have been more stable than what I had at home, actually. And it was definitely more rigid as far as like the schedule, which was good for me at the time. And so I left. I had early bird class for school, so I was out, and I was in Durand, so I'm leaving at 5:30 in the morning to get to school on time. And then I worked after school. I did sports after school, and then I worked after that. And I would volunteer for every closing shift at A&W because otherwise I'm just going to go sit on my ass and probably actually do my homework. Which is another thing, like, you know, I ended up kind of buckling back down with some of my schoolwork, and, you know, it's good to have a regular schedule. So I was going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, and even though it was in a jail, everyone there was pretty friendly.
Okay.
And when I got out, the day before graduation, and I kind of chose that. They let me choose when I was going to do this 60 days. So I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to do it right before I get done with school. And it was really fun cruising around with my friends, knowing kind of school's done. I don't have to go back to jail. It was, you appreciate things a lot more when you have your freedom temporarily removed, you know?
Well, I bet.
Yeah.
For sure. You're a little more grateful for the things that you can do and
I mean, just
you're allowed to do, right?
To see the street lights at night. I mean, just a lot of little things that you don't even think about that you're like, I haven't been outside at night in a while because I've been reporting back to, you know, jail by 8 o'clock at night and sitting in there. And,
Okay. Is there anything you think you would change about how you grew up and the things that you did?
Yeah, that's always, I mean, it's kind of like saying, do you regret parts of your life? And, I mean, there's definitely things I could have done better. There's lessons I could have learned sooner or not through my own experience. But I'm not going to argue with, you know, the result of where I've ended up. You know, I'm very happy with, you know, my family and where I'm at and my career. And, you know, obviously still have a lot of goals, but I'm not. It brought me to here, right? So
you wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I mean, but besides maybe, you know, I spent a lot of time. I don't know if you can say I would change anything. I would maybe, it'd be easy to say like some business lessons that I learned along the way where I should have maybe like, you think that may have occurred to you like 5 years sooner than it did, and you could have saved yourself a lot of grief, or, you know, you could have, you know, not drank as much, you know, because I really don't consume much for alcohol now, and that's something that has improved my life a lot. And I did a lot of research on that theory, probably more than I needed to do. Over between 25 to 35 years old, I, you know, drank a lot. So probably would have maybe had some, you know, less detrimental effects. You know, there's a lot of people that still struggle with it and, you know, have a lot of terrible effects on their life. And I can't really say I had anything too terrible, but, you know, that's, I think when you get to a point where you're like, you know, it's not good for your health, or you're not remembering things, or you're going, you know, who did I piss off last night, you know, and what did I say that I shouldn't have? And, you know, it's time to be done, you know?
Yeah, I could speak exactly from experience from that, as well as college days for me. The end of my college career is all drinking, and every single weekend I'm blacking out and not remembering half the night. And it's like, how is this actually good for me? What is this doing for me? This is doing nothing for me.
Yep. Yeah, if you don't remember all the fun times you're having,
what's
then
the point?
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, part of it for me is being an introvert. It helps me talk to people too.
Definitely a social lubricant.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's kind of what, you know, when I got into trying to promote my business more and going to, you know, networking events. I mean, there's an excuse to drink every night of the week, and there's places where it's available. You go over to this meeting, you go to that meeting. It's just part of, because a lot of people need it to socialize, you know.
Especially in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's part of our culture here, for sure.
Yeah. Can't really go anywhere where there's not alcohol served.
Actually, our whole country was kind of built on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at every little town that gets built, once one of the first things that goes up, I mean, it's like you'd go to the church first or the tavern first, you know?
Yeah. You got a good point there. Sometimes at the same time.
Yeah, right.
You need that beer while you're building that church.
Right, someone's got to water down the carpenters.
Okay. What was your college experience like?
Brief, twice. Actually, 3 times if you count trying the tech college. Yeah, I was supposed to be the kid that was college bound, right? I graduated with honors and I got college credit in high school, and it wasn't even a question that that's what was going to happen. I was going to go to school. I got accepted into the Institute of Technology at the University of Minnesota, moved into the dorms. They did trimesters over there, so I'm not sure how long a trimester is, but I'm not sure I made it halfway through a trimester before I realized, I was going to these auditoriums where there's an Indian professor and I'm sitting halfway back and I can barely make out what he's explaining in his thick Indian accent, and I'm trying to, cover it in the textbook, and kind of realizing I can sit down and read this textbook and I can teach this to myself and I can understand it. And I'm going to class and it's frustrating and I'm not learning a lot, and I ended up just spending my time just reading the book. And that, along with realizing like there are a lot of kids here that are way smarter than me, and our graduating class is going to be about 10,000 students, and that's my competition for whatever jobs are going to be out there. And somewhat missing my friends and missing my girlfriend from that last summer before college, and not working much, so not having a lot of money, and being a broke college student and struggling through seeing how this is gonna be a part of my life after college, and felt like advanced high school, and I was paying for it. And I didn't want to do it anymore, so I didn't. Yeah. I went to the admissions office and just said, I'm not sure if you can give me any of my money back, but if you can, that would be really nice. I'm leaving. And I called my buddies up and showed up with a pickup from Eau Claire, and we threw all my stuff in, and I rented they had a 2-bedroom apartment, but it had a laundry room, and they didn't have a washer and dryer. And I kind of went in there and went, I could fit a single bed in here. How about I give you guys $100 a month and pay a third of the utilities, and I'll live in the utility closet. And was my first apartment after college, coming back to Eau Claire. And it was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah. It was fun to be back with my buddies, and I went back to work for a guy that I worked for the summer before college, who was a great guy, and I learned a lot. A very successful contractor, did asbestos removal. Todd Brackenwagen, rest in peace. He was died way too young. He got prostate cancer. He was like a picture of health too. The dude like lifted weights all the time, and would take his family out boating, and he just was like a family man and very successful with his business, and I super looked up to him, and learned a lot working with him. Okay.
You say he's almost like a mentor?
Yeah, he did. He had he was a different kind of a guy. I mean, I don't think he was very strong, like spiritually, during the time that I knew him. He definitely found that later, I think, when he became ill. But he had a lot of good traits that I looked up to. His success in business and the way he made decisions around business. A lot of times and I didn't know any better. He was the first real successful business person I'd had any contact with. And so I learned things from him that I should do, and I learned things from him what not to do.
Yeah. Like
you do anybody, I guess.
Right. If you're willing to look at it for what it is.
Yeah, objectively.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. He didn't want to grow, and I was hungry to do more and be more and have more responsibility and make more money, and where are we going with this, and what's the future look like? And he had a bunch of investment properties, and he'd done his business for, I think he started in the mid 80s or something, and so by the time I was working there, he had was past the startup phase. He was 10, 12 years into his business, and he had a good crew of guys, and I worked my way up through that, depending on the time of the year, 3 to 6 or 7 guys depending on the size of the workload that we had going. And we worked all over. I worked on the road a lot, which was good, because I like to work a lot, as I kind of mentioned earlier. And this was a job where, we're up at 6 a.m. going, we're working till 6 o'clock at night, and then you're on the road, so you don't have a lot of opportunity to screw off.
Yeah.
We screwed off as much as you can screw off.
Right.
But I was 18 when I started there, and all the other guys were of drinking age. So, within like a week, they're like, we're going to have to find you a fake ID.
Yeah.
And they did.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And so that was, it was good. It was something to be a part of, and it ran its course pretty quickly because as I asked, like, where are we going with this? It wasn't something he was looking to make into more. He had made it what he wanted it to be, and that became clear to me, and I had to go do something else.
Right.
And I think parts of my family at the time were kind of like looking at me a little bit like, here's this kid that did well at school, supposed to go to college, dropped out of college, work in construction. It's not the success story they were probably thinking. And even in my own head, I was like, I have more potential than this. Making good money and working, using your back to make money. It was at 20 years old, it's probably the appropriate spot for a lot of 20-something-year-old men to be in is, working hard, because you got energy to burn off, and you're broke. So it's a good way to make money. But I knew I needed to do something different. And my grandma, who raised me for a lot of part of my life, sent me a book written by a guy named Harvey McKay. He was a envelope manufacturer turned self-help, business guru, and wrote a syndicated column that she read. And she was a big writer. She would write me a letter almost every single week.
Yeah.
And she wrote this guy letters. He wrote a column, and she read it in the newspaper, and she would like correspond with him.
Yeah.
And he sent her one of his books. He sent her a lapel pin with a note saying, she probably was talking to him about me, and he gave her this and said, have him come and interview with me and tell him to wear this pin.
Oh, wow.
And then she sent me this book and the pin and kind of this, hey, here's, quit being a whatever, be more successful, kid. I raised you, and she was always very loving, but she sent that to me, and I never wore the pin, and I never went and interviewed with him, but I read the book that he had, and it sparked me kind of back to my paper route days of like running my own business. And It just became, I got bit by this, like, I need to start my own business. That's what I meant to do. I'm not going to be removing asbestos anymore. I need to find something to do. And so then I started reading other books about that, and what are my resources, and how do I start from, my, a shared apartment with these guys to doing something with myself. And I was like, well, what do I know how to do? I know how to remove asbestos. And I was actually good at it. By the time I left, I was running the crew.
Yeah.
And so I started bidding on jobs to do asbestos removal, and I started making lists of all the equipment I needed to buy and coming up with a name and a logo and all of that. And after I bid a couple of jobs, I got a letter from the guy's attorney that I worked for saying, cease and desist. You signed this non-compete contract when you were 18 years old and you started working here. I signed a whole bunch of stuff, like you get a job and you're like, sign a bunch of paperwork. I didn't read it. I didn't really pay attention to it. He would have us do that every year. He would have like a sit down, re-sign some paperwork. And I had kept, after my first, once I was working there, I had kept some of that paperwork. And it turned out to be important because, I was already speaking with an attorney about setting up an LLC, and I showed him this letter I got from the attorney saying, hey, you can't do this anymore, you're legally. And he said, well, that's probably not going to hold up in the state of Wisconsin because Wisconsin courts do not look fondly on businesses trying to stop people from doing what is their livelihood, which is the thing that they know how to do. However they learned how to do it, like you can't stop them from doing that, or say the only way you can do what you know how to do is if you're doing it under my wing. And so he was pretty confident that it was going to get thrown out. And so he said, we'll get it in front of a judge and they'll do a declaratory judgment where they just read the agreement and they hear the details and they declare the court is gonna hold this up or not. But that doesn't happen next Tuesday. Right. And I wasn't working. As I'd quit to go do this, and now I was kind of sitting on my hands because in there it said any work that you do, you have to pay him triple whatever that, so I was really okay, I'm not risking this. Yeah. And at the time, my roommate was laid off from a company that did sprinkler systems. And we went over to his dad's house, and his dad was working on a retaining wall, and he said, when I get this retaining wall done, I'm gonna call the place where you work and have them come out and because he was running a crew installing sprinkler systems. Yeah. And he said, I'm gonna have you guys come out through the company you work for and install a sprinkler system here. And he had been laid off for a while, and I had covered his rent for a couple months, and I was kind of nudging him, hey, why don't you know how to do this, right? And he's like, yeah. And I said, why don't you and I rent some equipment and get the stuff and do your dad's sprinkler system, and he can pay us, and we can make some money. I'm not working right now. You're not working right now. Mm-hmm. You owe me money. It'd be really great because you can pay me back. It'll be wonderful. And he's like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And we talked to his dad, and his dad's like, yeah, if you guys want to do it, go ahead. You can put it in. So we rented equipment. We put in the sprinkler system. The neighbor came out and said, hey, I want one of those at my house. And we said, when we're done here, we're coming over to your house. And we went over to his house and put his sprinkler system in. And I was asking my roommate, I'm like, who do we call to come and inspect or check off or whatever? And he's like, no. He's like, you don't have to. Because I'd been doing asbestos removal where there was a industrial hygienist and the DNR and the health department and the EPA and everyone was in your business. And he was like, you can just, and I was like, we can just work and do the job and then be done and no one's going to criticize us or whatever. And so it was putting together a big model and then you get to turn it on and it all works. It was like building a Rube Goldberg machine that waters your lawn. And I had done a little of it when I was a kid. A friend of mine had an older sister and her boyfriend worked for a company doing sprinkler systems, and he had put one in for the family house there, and we helped. Yeah. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. I think I was maybe 13 years old or something, and we were using equipment to put pipes in the ground, and there was wires, and it all seemed so complicated, and then when it was done, water's flying and going where it's supposed to, and that made an impression on me, and then this kind of opened the door to wow, maybe asbestos removal isn't the business I should do. Maybe I should, this seems way more fun. It's outside. It's, you're not getting inspected, and the house that we were working at was this beautiful, to me, it was like a mansion, and it had these retaining walls down to a creek, and it was it looked like a wedding venue in their backyard, and we were working back there. It's a pretty nice work environment. Oh, yeah, yeah. Better than crawling through steam tunnels removing old insulation, from 1910, and so. I worked asbestos removal for a summer. Yeah. A lot of tile, a lot of small holes you have to crawl through. And it's pretty rough. Yeah, so working outside is a hell of a lot better than that. Yeah, so I said to my roommate, I said, hey, why don't I start a business? I kind of have done all the research on how to write a business plan and, a lot of this marketing stuff, and, I thought I knew something. And I said, why don't we come up with the name and I'll put an ad in the paper or in the yellow pages, which I did. I took out the biggest ad you could take. What year is this? This was 1990. This is genius move. Let's start an irrigation company September of 1999, 2 months before the ground freezes. Yep. I put in a $600 a month yellow page ad because no one was really using the internet. Websites were just becoming a thing, and I didn't know anything about it. But everyone used the yellow pages, and I thought, well, they agreed to let me put the ad in there. I don't have any idea how I'm going to pay $600 a month, but once they distribute the phone books, it's not like they can pull the ad. So I should get some business from it. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, well, I guess we're both out. And, you can take those kind of risks when you're 20 years old.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I guess at the time, 1999, I graduated in 96, so I was 21. And so people called on the Yellow Page ad, and we put in a couple sprinkler systems. And I learned a lot. I learned that my roommate knew enough to install a sprinkler system, but barely. And he was a drinker, and he ended up that fall, he got 2 DUIs in 2 weeks.
Oh boy.
On the same street from the same cop.
Oh God.
And
not learning a lesson there.
No, there was one street between where the bar was he went to and where our apartment was. And he had a little Eagle Talent TSI Turbo, and it was like a go-kart. And I ended up with the car because I had paid his rent for so long. That's how he paid me back when he moved to Las Vegas, because he didn't want to deal with his DUIs.
Oh,
so that was my first fall, my first couple months in business. I learned that the guy that I was trying to partner up with. So then that winter, I had to dig in and be like, learn a lot.
Yeah.
But I was excited about it. I mean, I took all the money I had in the world at the time, any significant money, and I used it to buy a plane ticket to go to a conference, to take classes and become a certified irrigation contractor, which I had to fudge on the application because you're supposed to have like years of experience before you go do this. And I was like, I'll just really read a lot. And I did. I learned a ton. The technical side, all the hydraulics and the flow rates and how to actually design and do proper installation. Because that wasn't something that Jeff, he just was winging it. He probably wasn't that into it. It was just a job to him. And but he'd done it long enough that within the context of the company that he worked for, he was probably a good foreman. But once we didn't have the structure of the place that he worked, it was just him and I, and he didn't know enough to really pull it together. And,
So I'm noticing that when you're excited and you're into something and you're all in, essentially, you're willing to do whatever you need to do to make it work.
Yeah.
You're reading the books by yourself. You're putting extra time in all these, in doing an insane amount of work, because you like work for one thing, which helps a lot. But then you're also doing the other things that are going to get you steps ahead.
Yeah. So having that picture in your mind of where you're headed, and I kind of always, at least from the time that I read that book that my grandma sent me, there was this like idea in my head of like owning and running and being part of this business. And that Harvey Mackay's books, I mean, I've given them to my son to read. I don't know that he has, but he was, very motivating guy. Kind of a Zig Ziglar type of a guy.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah. It's always been that way with me, with whatever. And just like college, right? Like you're getting up morning after morning after morning going, I'm not excited about doing this.
Yeah.
Like I can't keep doing it. I got to do something different. And there's been other points in my life where that's the case, where you realize like, you ever listen to Jordan Peterson, and he talks about like, you have to listen to that or you just become like bitter, right?
Oh, for sure.
You get old and bitter, and instead of being excited about learning something new and going after what actually gets you fired up.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I would have took your route with you in college, but since I started off with sports in college, it stuck me.
Yeah, you had the hook there.
A little longer. But the second I was taking classes and things, I was not excited about it, because you're also taking a lot of these liberal arts things that you just don't care about at all.
Yeah, but I would argue that you had a great experience, I would imagine, because just the competing at sports at that level is
the only reason I was in college.
Yeah, well, that's worth it, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, builds a lot of character to compete at anything at that intensity, you know?
Yeah. Well, to a point. And then there's a point where you think you're better than everybody else, but you're not playing.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
That's not a good combo, right?
No.
And that's where I switched colleges, partly because of that and to be closer to family. So that's where I came here. I started at Moorhead, Minnesota State Moorhead for football. And then
that was a University of Minnesota Moorhead, right?
Yeah.
I remember getting information in high school, and their big hook was you got a laptop computer if you went to college there. And it was like,
at that time, yeah.
I'm thinking I might go to school there, you get a laptop.
Yeah, at that time, that's a big deal.
Yeah, in 1996, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of wandered through college for 6 years then after that.
Did you graduate?
Nope.
Yeah.
Never graduated.
Yeah.
I was still like attempting to graduate when I started here at Fiddle Elite.
Sure.
And then once I was here, enjoying it so much, I'm like, I don't actually need a degree to do this.
It's a lot more interesting to learn things and apply them immediately to what you're doing.
I agree.
Than, you know, I'm going to learn all this and this is for something someday, I hope maybe, you know. That's why I think apprenticeship is such an awesome concept. And I think that, you know, the world is changing so quickly now with all of the new access to information. And I think that the whole college system is probably, and I don't know this for sure, but I would guess there's probably some waning, you know, enrollment, and a lot of people are probably thinking of a different way. Well, I mean, look at how many kids are having success now with podcasts and YouTube channels and all the different things that if you just go, like anything, you get out of it what you put into it. And if you're going to put a whole lot into it, and that's some of what you learn by sticking with college to get a degree,
right.
You know, so I think college has its usefulness for a lot of people, the people that kind of need the guide rails and to be coaxed along a path. And
right.
But if you're self-motivated and you're excited about going out and doing something, why would you put a pause on that to go do something that you're not excited about? It just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the other thing that's nice about college is you have a set structure. And I think it's a lot harder for a lot of people to give themselves the structure that they need to continue to grow and build something.
Yep. Yeah, I luckily with the trade that I picked with installing sprinkler systems, there's so much manual work to be done that it kind of keeps you on track, right? Because I told this person I was going to do this job, and this job is just a tremendous amount of work, and so you go and you work, you know, and there's not a lot of decisions. Should you go left or should you go right? It's just dig the next hole and put the next sprinkler head in, you know, and keep going, you know.
And then hopefully you're doing a good enough job to where other people are appreciating it, they're talking about it. And
my dad kind of gave me that advice early on. He's like, don't worry about charging too much, or which could go either way, you know, that can be bad advice at some point. But when you're 20 and you're just getting going, there's nothing worse than someone that overconfidence, thinks they're great, charging too much money, you know, and then it doesn't. So I was definitely a low ball, like a lot of people get into doing things. I didn't care how much I charge, as long as I charge enough to not lose money. I just wanted all the experience that I could get. I wanted to do every sprinkler system that there was to do, because I just wanted the experience of doing it and to get more customers and to grow the business. And it was a fun time. I look back at, you know, like we all do, different periods of our life, you remember the good things, you know, and it was a grind. I know there was periods where I got up at 6 a.m, didn't go to bed till 9 o'clock at night. All I did was work in between, and I did that. I remember there was one time I was doing, it was like the 14th day in a row, and I'm like, it's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to write out invoices, and I'm falling asleep, and I'm like, what am I doing? Why? Like, this is not, again, one of those revelations where it's like, this is not the way. Something's got to change. You know, I got to do something different here. And
yeah, your nose is so hard into the grindstone, and you're working yourself to death almost.
Yep, you got to pick your head up and look around and go,
there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, let's.
So what was the better way from there?
Yeah, it was build the organization. You know, look at the people that are there to help you. You know, at that time I was hiring guys out of the Huber program. And I think somewhat because I thought I had been in that Huber program not very many years before that, and I thought that's at the county jail. You can go down there, and guys that are cleared to work during the day.
Okay.
I don't know why they call it Huber, but so I would pick up a couple guys there in the morning, and we would go dig in sprinkler systems.
Okay.
I remember one time I did a system for a sheriff's deputy in Chippewa, and you know, those he had checked into me, you know, and it hadn't been too many years since I had a lot of stuff on my record.
Yep.
Then I'm showing up with these guys from jail, you know, and but he never said anything to me. He hired me, he gave me a chance, and then he told me, I don't know, it might have been a couple of years later, I was over servicing in his sprinkler system. He said, you know, he kind of told me the story of how he had some real reservations about having me at his property and those other guys but then he had kept an eye on me, you know, as I had done. I ended up doing his brother's sprinkler system and some other family people, and he was a great person to have worked for at that point in my life, because he knew the trouble I'd been in, and he knew the type of people I had around me. And so when you're saying about what I needed to do different, is I needed to get some other people involved that weren't you know, maybe had their life together a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so that was, you know, where I started realizing, like, I started hiring college guys.
Okay.
For the summer, which comes with their own problems, right? You know, sometimes they don't show up to work, they're hungover, they're, you know, but by the time they get halfway through August, they want to go party with all their friends that are coming to college, and they're bailing on working out the rest of the summer. And I learned some lessons there, but I just met some really awesome guys too that were like, could take responsibility and weren't going to rob me when I wasn't there, or weren't gonna, you know, they weren't chain smoking cigarettes all day. And so we started having a more fun crew and a better work environment, and I started to realize what work environment was, you know.
Right.
So,
yeah.
The business grew, and then at one point we grew from a $1 million revenue business to a $2 million revenue business over the course of a single year, because I was selling sprinkler systems. It was kind of like I arrived. You know, I'd been running around in a rusty pickup truck with no lettering on it, and we did 10 systems, and we did 20 systems, and the next year we did 30, you know, and it just kept growing. Then I could actually afford to put letters on the truck and get a service van, and I was working out of what used to be a little shack of a house that I was able to buy, which I was pretty proud of, which is where our shop is now on London Road.
Okay.
And my wife came to work for a summer. That's a whole, I mean, met my wife, almost quit doing the business because she was working over and had graduated college and had her first big girl job over, you know, working over there. And I was fortunate that the spring that I was really wanting her to come back, and she was still like unsure. She didn't want to quit her job. I wanted to move back to Eau Claire. She, because I would go work over there in the wintertime, because there's really nothing to do over here. I did some snow plowing, but, and she, the company she worked for it closed down. They laid off 5,000 people.
Shit.
Yeah, and she got at 21 or 22 or whatever, they gave her a severance package, and she was put on unemployment, and it was perfect timing because my phone started ringing in Eau Claire, and I was this close to being like, you know, not continuing with the business. Like, you know, I'm in love with this girl over here. There's plenty of jobs at big companies over there that would love to have me. I actually went to work for one of them for the winter, and I was actually pretty well planning on just not doing my business anymore. And then that happened, and my phone was ringing off the hook. And I was like, I think this is just good timing. I quit that job that I had, and her and I moved to Eau Claire. and we bought that house, and
It's like it's meant to be.
yeah, it all kind of came together, you know, and my cell phone had been the main where I took all the calls.
Right.
And then I had that burden off from me because she was there taking all those calls and straightening out a whole bunch of other things that I'm sure I was screwing up in the office. And that was kind of the beginning of like building more of a solid team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what year was that when your wife came on to kind of help around the office?
Let's see. So I
Like
started
year in business and actual year.
Yeah, so she always likes to remind me to help me remember when we met and when we got married. We met in 2000 and we were married in 2005. And so this was probably 2002.
Okay.
So 3 years after I started it, and would be kind of going into probably my fourth summer. She came in and ran the office. After that summer, because there wasn't much to do in the winter. We were doing some snow plowing stuff, but I was to the point financially where I could budget to be off in the winter because we were doing enough work in the summer. And, we work on our equipment and kind of get ready for the next year. That winter, I worked really hard on designing the shop that we have now. And then that following summer, I tore down the old house and we built the shop. And she went to work that winter because there was nothing to do. Right. And then come spring, she was like, I kind of like this job. She had a job in marketing at a seminar company, and they were paying her good and had good benefits. And I was like, yeah, I'll just have to hire someone. And it turned out, as we were talking, we would hang out with her parents a lot or go have dinner over there. And her sister graduated with like a management information systems, and she didn't have a job lined up. She was working at the grocery store still. That was like her college job. And I talked her into by telling her she could do her laundry. I was like, hey, you can do your laundry during the day here. All you have to do is answer the phone. You'll figure out how to help you. Ask your sister. She was here all summer. I'm going to be out working, meeting with people. I'll be in and out of the office, but I won't be here much.
Yeah.
And she was really kind of concerned, like, well, what am I doing? And I was like, answer the phone, talk to people. You'll figure it out.
I love that advice.
Literally no systems whatsoever.
Yeah.
And and she still works with me at Rainmaster. She's been there over 20 years. Her sister, Mindy, was the glue there for a lot of years, kind of holding everything together. She's our HR department now.
Yeah.
Still holding it together.
How many people did you have working for you at that time? So 02? Or 03?
5.
Okay. How many people do you have working for your Rainmaster now?
35.
You have 2 different.
Yep. We
locations.
Maybe 10 years ago, we bought out a company that was failing. Our distributor called us. I think I shouldn't say mostly. He knew I was looking to expand. And this guy had run up a big tab for materials and was drinking his face off and getting divorced and not taking care of his business and had a significant, I think he had 1,500 accounts and that he was taking care of. And he was installing a lot of systems and had a big crew, but it was all just crumbling because he wasn't doing what he did to get it to that point. And so that guy called me and I went and met with him, and pretty much all he wanted was to get out from under some of this debt that he had taken on to get to the business to that point. And so that wasn't the first business I had bought, but that's what started our Minnesota branch, buying out this company over there. And that was good. Now that branch is as big as our branch in Eau Claire.
Yeah. How many encompassing employees is there now?
There is 10 technicians over there. And then, Claire, we also have that's mostly irrigation. And then we have probably 12 irrigation guys over here. And then we've got a few lawn care guys, maybe 4 total. 3 here, 1 there. And then our office staff and couple leadership people. And yeah, so I think it's about 35 altogether.
pretty good size.
Yeah, it's this September will be 25 years.
That's incredible.
It's been a long time growing that business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that business afforded you other opportunities, right?
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, everything I have, I kind of owe to that business, and because it's been profitable, and I've invested it in mostly real estate along the way, and that during times where that business hasn't done well, I've been able to feed it, keep it going with money, foundation, security that I created, equity I created in some real estate transactions with apartment buildings and some commercial buildings, and so it's been a good match, right?
Yeah. I kind of want to point out, you kind of keep pointing over that way.
I'm looking right through a window right here, and I can see our shop, and it's right through our back parking lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you helped build this building, right?
Yep.
Italy, where we currently are.
Yep.
And it's right next door to Rainmaster. So
Yeah.
you keep.
I forget that there's a camera on us right now, and it's not just an audio podcast.
You just kind of keep pointing over there. Like, that's you're just looking straight at your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I've talked to you about why you got into real estate before. It was because you said mostly all wealthy people that you know of or have heard of are in real estate.
Yeah, you hear that stat, right? Like 4 out of 5 millionaires are involved in real estate, and I mean, now I can speak from experience with it, but you know, when I first got into it, it was that simple. It was like you look around at the people that are kind of have financial success, and most of them have some kind of real estate holdings, or just that is what they do, is just real estate.
Right.
So yeah, it's big transactions, and there's a lot of responsibility with it too. I mean, a lot to learn.
Oh yeah. And did you feel like at a point, was it getting into real estate was partly because of security, because you liked having that financial security, or is it because you felt like maybe you're stagnating a little bit in your growth, or you feel like you had more?
I never felt like I was stagnated with that business. It was more a matter of like, it seemed like the right thing to do. You know, it seemed like like people say, oh, you should save money in your Roth IRA or 401k. Like that's what responsible people do. It just felt like as a business owner that was having some success and I was having some extra money, it was like, well, I don't need any more trucks, and the business is growing as fast as I would want it to grow. Like, we made this money, like, what do you do with it? You know? And at least if I put it in some real estate, I felt like I had some control over it. And I had some opportunities that popped up. The first deal that I did was a building across the street from the shop that the police dragged a guy out of there and he went to prison. And then the building was just sitting there empty. It was a duplex type of a house that someone had made into a duplex. And it was sitting on about, I don't know, an acre of land. And I would see it every day, like empty, and thought, I should buy that and fix it up. And I didn't know how to even get a hold of anyone. Then one day a sign went up, and I was like, oh, all right. I called, and a local realtor helped me with the transaction, Dave Donnellan. And a funny story about him with that property, once we worked through and we had the deal signed, it was going to be something like 2 months or something before they could close. I don't know what was going to hold it up so long. The bank that had taken it back or whatever was in Washington State, I think. And I had planned to, because it sat so long, the water meter froze, it flooded the basement, the furnace was shut, like it needed a ton of work. Well, the deal we got signed was like in February, and I thought, February, March, I got a couple of months here, and then my sprinkler business is going to be going gangbusters, and I got a few guys that are needing something to do in the wintertime. We'll go in and gut the place out and fix it all up, and that'll be something to do for a couple months until we get back to work. But then found out after we got the deal signed that we couldn't close until almost exactly when the frost is coming out of the ground and Rainmaster is going to be hitting high gear. Mm-hmm. So I asked Dan if I could go in and just kind of clean it up a little bit. And he said, oh yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. And we went and gutted the whole thing and did everything that I wanted to do. Yep. And then I leased it out. And people moved in, and I was collecting rent,
Before it even closed?
and then I closed.
That's awesome.
And he was having a heart attack about that.
Oh, I bet.
Because he came by and realized just how far along we were, and it was like, more so for me, because, you know, if those people backed out, I would have invested.
Right, you would have been screwed.
Yes, I made all those improvements to the property, and really legally, they could have been upset with me for going in and demoing out their.
Yeah.
You know, it was in pretty rough shape, and we've since torn that building down. But that was a good project, and that's really what got me into real estate, because that deal was one where I think I paid. It was 99. They are asking, I think, like 150,000, and I offered them 75, and they said we won't sell it for less than 100. Or he came back with that, and I said, well, I'll offer him 99 then. And so then they accepted the 99, and then I spruced it up. I think I put about $10,000 of my own money into it, and a lot of my own labor.
Yeah.
And it appraised for $136,000, and then. That was back when a bank would lend on an appraisal.
Okay.
So once I had an appraisal for $136,000, they're like, oh, we can only borrow you 80%. Well, 80% of 136 is something like $106,000 or $107,000. Well, that's about what I had into it.
Right.
So I was like, this is amazing. I own this property. I only have a loan for maybe $108,000 or $109,000. It's worth $100,000. I just made $26,000 on paper. Plus, I'm collecting rent every month, and it's more than what I'm paying for my payment. Yep. So it was a quick lesson of how things can go well. Right. And I know a lot of people get into real estate, and it goes not that well. But it was good for me. And so I was like, I think I'm going to do more of that. So when opportunities came up, the next one was I bought a house to live in, and it was on 1.5 acres, and I went to sell the house, and my father-in-law just kind of offhandedly suggested the house was way over on one side of the property. He goes, why don't you just make a new property line and just keep some of that land? You could build a duplex on it. It was right on London Road. It was a real busy road in the south side of town, and I was like, that's a great idea. So I surveyed the land, and I ended up having to eliminate the septic system and tie it into the city sewer. But I sold the house, and we built the duplex, and we lived on one side of the duplex. And then the guy that owned the next 2 empty lots that were there came along and said, I never really knew how I was going to build into the side of this hill, but I had built into an even steeper part of the hill, further up the bank. And he goes, it looks like you're having no problem doing it, so why don't you buy these lots from me? So I bought 2 more lots, and that was when I got a partner in real estate, and that was my business partner, Bill Albright.
Okay.
He was a builder. I was doing sprinkler systems for him. Young family, similar aged. We hit it off, and he worked for a guy that had a lot of rental properties, and he saw how he wanted that for himself, and he was kind of saying that to me, like, I want to get into doing rental properties. And I said, I just did a duplex. I don't know, or a couple of, this deal and this deal, and he had actually helped me with the trim work on that one. Since he was hiring me to do sprinkler systems, I hired him to do, the base and casing and cabinets and doors and stuff on that. And I said, why don't we just become partners on these next 2 lots? And that was a great partnership, because he is a driven guy and was all about kind of perfecting the art of getting a building built on time and on budget, and he did 2. We did 1 a year, a duplex a year for the next 2 years on those 2 lots, and that really forged our partnership. I did he would put together a budget and say, this is what I'm going to spend. I would deal with the bank. My wife helped with getting, showing it and getting it leased and doing all the bookkeeping and, getting the insurance, and then he was aggressive and he wanted to do more, and it was the same kind of deal where we got it built, and we're like, we're positive on our equity right off the bat. We have cash flow with these, like we could just pay, copy and paste as many times as we can do this. Let's do it. And so he found a spot where we could do 5 of them, not far from where he lived. We did that. He found another spot where we could do 16 of them. We did that. And then we built some 8-unit buildings, and it just kept snowballing from there. It was everything was just going well. So we just kept going.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that through you talking all this stuff. You're seeing the opportunities and you don't have a second thought of whether you're going to take the opportunity or not.
Yeah, I mean, some of that I would say definitely. I mean, when you're having success, you feel almost like those opportunities are coming into your life, like not by accident.
Yeah.
And so you don't question it because God's presented it in your life, and who are you to go, And now, once you're in real estate and people find out you're in real estate and people find out that you have money, then you get a lot more things coming your way, and you have to start going, okay, well, obviously this is not just all stuff I should do, and I couldn't do all of it if I wanted to.
Right.
So, and I think there's a saying I've heard before, like, when you're starting your business, you say yes to everything. You tell whatever, you make your first $1 million saying yes to everything, and you make every million after that saying no more, and kind of honing in on like exactly what you do and do well. Okay. And you're just gonna, you make small improvements to that, and don't kind of stick to your strategy kind of thing. And
okay.
And that's, like even with my contracting business, like, I started off with asbestos, and there were still opportunities that would come up with asbestos. So like, nope, I just do irrigation systems. In fact, our motto forever on all of our trucks and letterhead and everything was your irrigation specialist. Like that was, to me, that was like, I specialized in doing lawn sprinkler systems. I didn't lay sod. I didn't do retaining walls. I didn't spread black dirt. I won't clean your gutters. I'm here to install and service your sprinkler system. And I think that was a key to our success, was just saying, this is our niche, and we're going to stick to it.
You have your niche, you do it really well, better than everybody else.
And I've screwed that up. I bought a plumbing business. We were going to start doing plumbing. We did a lot of plumbing for all the sprinkler systems we were putting in. At one point, we were putting 300 plus sprinkler systems a year in. And every single one of those, there's a licensed portion of that job. You can't run around the state of Wisconsin doing plumbing without a plumbing license.
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't. I did do quite a bit of that. But eventually I was like, we're reaching out, and a lot of these plumbers don't want to do the work for us because it's a very small amount of work. It's, one valve, a pipe up, and get out the side of the house.
Okay.
But they're going to spend a half a day by the time they drive over, see what they need, get what they need, do the work. And so it was expensive, because plumbers are expensive, as they should be. And so I thought, we need to just have our own guy that this is all he does, is go around and do this. And we were able to do that. We started a plumbing apprenticeship program. We had a couple apprentices go through. We bought a bigger plumbing company over in Menominee. It was a family-run thing. I learned a lot about cultures, and that if you're blending two businesses, the cultures have to match. The two cultures did not match, and we had worked with a family that, it just didn't work out. We ended up selling most of the business back to them and moving on from that. And then we sold our plumbing division, the part out of Eau Claire that was still working with the guys that we had. We sold it to them. One guy, Jamie, who I'd mentioned earlier.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
He bought Service First Plumbing from us and is still successfully operating that with his sons. And it's a great business, local business.
I feel like I see that van.
Yeah, he lives right over here. Yeah. They park in Rockman's lot.
Okay, yeah. I definitely see that van all the time.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. If you were to tell somebody starting out at 21, kind of like you did, starting their first business, what are the things that, like, top 2 things you tell them that you must do and top 2 things you must avoid?
Yeah, I think, especially when you're starting, a lot of it is self-discipline. You have to be really good at, like, one of your biggest resources is your own time. And you have to use your time very wisely. You have to be doing things that are going to be providing value to you or to your customers. And so just being, and that really never goes away. I mean, it changes what you're doing, what you're spending your time doing.
Right.
But you really have to manage your own time. And through that, you get this discipline that allows you to kind of help other people manage their time so that you can pick out and coach them so that you can kind of get everyone going in the same direction. And, and along with that discipline is financial discipline, because a lot of people, they think starting a business is buying all the fun stuff to get it going or spending all the money on the marketing, and they get too caught up in one part of it and forget the fact that, remember, we're providing goods or services to somebody, and that needs to be the main focus. All the other things just have to happen. So staying focused and managing your time, I think, are
big top two.
Yeah, that's off the top of my head here. That's what I got for you there. And then things not to do. That's. Try to keep it simple. It kind of goes back to the first two a little bit. I said, stay focused. And a lot of people, they lose interest, right? You have to see it through. To me, most of the fun of starting a business is in the beginning when you're starting it. And then at some point, usually about the time you start to make some money, it starts to get boring because it's almost like you figured out the puzzle.
Okay, yeah.
And it's hey, it works. I actually got it to work and it makes money. And now it's I kind of want to find something else to do, right. And that's good if you're able to hire some people in that are they see the opportunity and you can still remain involved and you can coach and you can give some guidance and they can make money and the business can keep growing. And that's, I would say, a little bit of kind of how I've looked at it and how I've done things. And again, if you're not excited in the morning to do what you're doing, it's pretty hard to get motivated just to grind it out. There are things that you have to do that with, but
right. There's a period of time where no matter what, you're going to have to
grind.
Yeah. Can't avoid it if you want to become successful at that thing that you're doing.
Yep. You can't just get bored with it and move on. And if you never actually made it work,
right.
You need to see it through.
Well, you kind of said even if you do make it work and is making money, but you lose interest there, you're probably going to lose the business essentially.
Yeah, unless you've gotten other people involved that see that opportunity and they can. So a lot of times when you're the person that starts it, right, and you have to do all the things, you're not doing a great job at all the things. You're picking and choosing what gets done. And then as you grow and you go, okay, I'm going at 110%, I'm going to pick the half of the things that I'm actually good at and I like to do, and I'm going to find somebody else. And this is an important point, finding people that aren't cookie cutters of you.
Yeah.
Because guess what? They're going to be good at and like to do the same stuff as you if they're just like you. Now, you have to have similar values and you have to agree on what the mission of the business is, but you need to find people that are different than you, that think differently than you, that challenge you, that actually are good at things that you're not good at. And it strengthens the business because that half of the stuff that you were doing mediocre, they're now kicking ass at it. And it's essentially just repeating that over and over again, growing a business, right. Going, okay, now each of you need to go, of the things that we're doing as you're finding success and you can afford to hire people, refining, what you're doing, and you'll be happier and happier doing more and more things that you're good at and like to do, and finding other people that can, find the yin to your yang kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think that's your top thing to avoid is hiring
all your friends.
A replica of yourself.
Yeah.
Or all your friends that probably aren't what actually suits the need that you have.
Right. You got to put the organization first. What is the business or whatever you're working on? What serves the mission? So
that's a good one. For sure. All right. Well, thanks, Paul, for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Happy to do it. Yeah.
It's a good conversation we had here.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. This has been the Inner Journeys, Outer Adventures podcast. We'll see you next time.